say, the Midlands into eastern England. Some sunshine here at times, a better chance compared to this afternoon. Elsewhere, generally cloudy skies, but the area of cloud and rain across Scotland sinks south into Northern Ireland, northwest England, and it brightens up for the north of Scotland with some sunshine here, albeit with a few showers for the far north. Feeling a bit colder here, otherwise it's another very mild afternoon to come with temperatures largely in the double figures. A lot of cloud cover then as we end Wednesday. Some breaks there to the east and the far north. With high pressure building from the south as we head towards the end of the week, it's going to be largely dry, but it will stay mostly cloudy and it will turn just a little bit colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. It's a big day in Parliament. We'll have the latest on the Tory rebellion against those COVID restrictions the government wants to implement today. We're talking about greenwashing in finance. We'll let you know more about that when we talk about it, and online harm too. And we'll be looking forward to Thursday's by-election and asking how much trouble might Boris Johnson be in that by-election. But first, it's the news with Rosie.
I'm Rosie Wright. Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date at 12 o'clock. A mother and her partner have been found guilty over the death of 16-month-old Garth Starr Hobson. The toddler died in September last year from catastrophic injuries which she received at her home in West Yorkshire. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill has been charged with her murder, and her mother, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. Boris Johnson is facing the biggest rebellion since he became Prime Minister, with dozens of Tory MPs expected to vote against COVID restrictions later today. More than 70 backbenchers have made it known that they will defy the government whip and oppose some Plan B measures for England. It's thought that up to 10 ministerial aides could also resign to oppose the controls. Several separate votes are going to be held on face mask rules, on mandatory vaccinations for NHS staff and on so-called COVID passports. Despite this, the measures, including COVID passes for entry into nightclubs and other venues, are expected to pass, with the support of the Labour Party, who back tighter controls. Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News he's against the idea of COVID passports.
You could go into a nightclub just using a lateral flow test, a negative one. I could get in using my dog-eared certificate showing I've had 2 vaccinations, which was completed 6 months ago. And that's been proved to show that 2 vaccinations is not enough to tackle this, to make sure that I'm immune. So there is not a logic behind this, but it is impacting big venues which are in my constituency, and that's why I think the government needs to think again on this. Why is it expending so much political capital on this issue when actually all of us want to get through this pandemic, get through this wave in a sensible way?
It's been difficult to get hold of COVID-19 lateral flow tests for the second day in a row. The tests have been unavailable to order via the government website. It's understood a number were available in the early hours of the morning. The problem is double jab people are now being asked to take a lateral flow test every day for 7 days if they come into contact with someone with coronavirus. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is appealing to the public to come forward and help with the booster jab rollout. Boris Johnson said tens of thousands of volunteers were needed to give out help for boosters to help curb the spread of the Omicron variant. It's after the government announced a target of nearly 1 million jabs a day to get all eligible adults vaccinated by the end of December. But former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly told GB News that's unrealistic.
Just to suddenly on Sunday night say, oh, listen, and by the way, on Monday we're going to do 1 million vaccinations. Oh, no, we're not. We've got to recruit the volunteers with the estates people who've got to sort out the locations, there's security, there's clinical waste, there's logistics. I mean, this is a big operation, and I'm not saying the NHS isn't up for it. It is. But if you simply do the numbers, the carryover of the unvaccinated into the next day, it's just statistically impossible to do by the end of the month.
Campaigners have described the government's plans to overhaul the Human Rights Act as a power grab and an attempt to put themselves above the law. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab will reveal new proposals which he says will strengthen typically British rights and add a healthy dose of common sense. Some campaigners, though, say these plans are threatening the ability to challenge those in power, and they warn the rights of ordinary people could be fatally weakened by the changes. The wife of a US diplomat who's charged with causing the death of a teenager by dangerous driving is going to face a UK court early next year. Anne Sakoulas is accused of killing Harry Dunn in a road crash outside US military base RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire in August 2 years ago. The Crown Prosecution Service say the case will be heard at Westminster Magistrates Court in January. The trial of a needle-free COVID-19 vaccine is being launched. The University of Southampton has developed a new method of delivery by using a jet of air to push it through the skin rather than a needle. You are up to date. I'll be back for more in half an hour. Right now, to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on the briefing, we'll have the very latest from Westminster on the Tory rebellion over COVID restrictions. We'll be talking greenwashing, where companies exaggerate how green and ethical they are, so you'll spend more money with them. And a report on online safety is out today. I'll be talking to Lucy Powell, Shadow Culture Secretary, about how we protect ourselves and our children from harm on the internet. And as Conservatives worry about losing their safe seat in North Shropshire on Thursday, I'll be asking the one and only Sir John Curtis if the shine is coming off Boris Johnson. Huge day in Parliament as the government proposes its Plan B COVID restrictions. The vote will be this evening. Many Conservatives are up in arms at the prospect of further curbs, and dozens are set to vote against vaccine passports or COVID passports, while our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in Westminster for us. Darren, what are the numbers looking like?
Well, it depends who you ask and who you listen to. They vary between around 60 to 80 Conservative MPs who may well vote against, particularly this issue of vaccine passports. There are going to be 4 votes tonight. It is on the issue of vaccine passports, though, that most Conservative MPs seem pretty animated about. When I say most, I mean the rebels. In saying that, these figures do tend to fluctuate, and this afternoon, as the debate gets underway, Gloria, as you will well know, the whips and the Prime Ministers will start twisting arms, they will start making phone calls, they will start to charm Uncle Joel MPs to back the government, and there are signs that that mission is already underway, and it is starting to work, with some Conservative MPs now, who had previously stated that they would vote against the government, suggesting they will now back them. We know the Prime Minister is individually calling a lot of Conservative backbenchers this afternoon to try and convince them. If it is, of course, around the 80 mark, that means the government's entire majority would have been overturned. It means that, of course, they will have to rely on Labour votes to get these measures through Parliament, though Labour have said they will back it in its entirety. But it's not a good look for the government, is it, to rely on the opposition to get legislation through, and that is why the government is concerned about this rebellion. Will it be as high as 80? I suspect in the end it probably will not be, but we are still potentially looking at the biggest rebellion Boris Johnson has faced as Prime Minister, though, of course, as you, again, Gloria, well know, governments do face rebellions on major issues, particularly in mid-term from time to time. It is damaging, but it's far from fatally damaging. But it is, I think, a reminder to the resistance within the Conservative Party to moving to Plan B. And in the end, Plan B is only taking England fundamentally to where Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales are. And the government at this stage not ruling out potentially further measures, even ahead of Christmas. You'd have to suspect if the Conservative Party, or lots of it, are pretty animated about moving to Plan B, you can well imagine the angry, the fury, the frustration about suggestions about moving to Plan C, D, or further along that track, certainly.
Indeed. What's the latest on the science?
Well, really fascinating. First of all, let's start here in the UK. The Health Secretary suggesting yesterday that we're probably, even though the official statistics don't show anything near this, at around 200,000 cases now a day here in the UK, primarily the Omicron variant. It is making up 44% of cases in the capital here in London. Yesterday, suggestions that could tip in to the 50% mark as of today, making it the dominant variant in London. It's around 20% elsewhere in the country. And to give you a sense of how quickly this is spreading, now we don't know this for definite, could be that there are glitches in the system, but it looks like it is now impossible to book a PCR test at a testing centre anywhere in England, which shows that there is incredible demand for people who suspect they may well have symptoms. Of course, not everyone will have it, but suspect they may have symptoms of coronavirus. They can now not book an appointment in any of the 9 regions around England. You can still book an appointment online and have a PCR test delivered to your home, but testing sites at the moment seem to be full. So there is no doubt, I think at this stage, and the scientists suggested it is all along as of the government, that this is highly transmissible, it is contagious, it is very easy to catch. The big question, of course, is about whether it is milder or not. Again, the evidence that we're seeing from South Africa this morning seems to suggest that it is milder than the Delta variant, which of course is good news. But in the end, it's not necessarily all good news, because if it is so much more transmissible, that so many more people catch it all at once, those absolute figures of people who might need hospitalizations, well, they could be greater than anything that we have seen before. Under the worst case projections, again, though we're dealing with preliminary data, we haven't got the full picture, it is quite difficult to judge. We know that 2 doses of the vaccine still give you some form of protection, particularly if you've had Pfizer, but it is not nearly as high as it was under Delta. And again, that is why the governments are arguing that people need to go out and get the booster vaccines, because it does seem that that does really do what it says on the tin. It boosts your immunity or your protection from this new variant. I have to say, anecdotally, I've just had mine in the last couple of minutes, my booster jab here in central London. All pretty easy, book it online. I queued for about less than 30 minutes in and out, so it is pretty easy. Long queues, people turning up for their appointments, though questions, of course, about whether the government will reach that big target of offering everyone a vaccine by the end of this year, let alone getting to delivering vaccines to everyone over the age of 18 by the end of this year.
Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, thank you. Now, most of us like to do our bit to try and help the planet, and companies are very aware that being seen to be green is good for their image. And with the UK being a global financial hub, there's big money at stake. But companies' claims often aren't all they seem. Well, the Conservative MP for Thirsk and Moulton is leading a Westminster Hall debate today in Parliament on so-called greenwashing in finance, and I'm delighted he joins us now. Good to see you, Kevin. Forgive me, but I must start by asking if you decided how you're going to vote today.
I thought you might ask me that. I think I'll probably vote with the government. In my view, taking a lateral flow test before you go to a large event or into a nightclub, not that I go to many nightclubs these days, doesn't seem too onerous. I think one or two of my colleagues are concerned, is it the thin end of the wedge? I don't think it is. I think the Prime Minister will see the extent of opposition to this within our ranks. I think these are sensible measures, but we want to make sure that the state doesn't get too intrusive in our daily lives, I think it's fair to say.
Do you think all these numbers that we read about, 60, 80, do you think it's all being a bit overblown?
Maybe, but there's a lot of concern. There's no doubt about it. I've talked to lots of fellow MPs who are really are concerned, principally around the thin end of the wedge argument. So they feel that this will be extended into other areas. So, and I don't think that will be the case. But nevertheless, I think people are keen to show the Prime Minister and some of his cabinet ministers, this is territory we're not comfortable in. And I'm not comfortable either. But I think we are in uncertain times. It's sensible to take sensible precautions.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, let's talk greenwashing, because you have a parliamentary debate on this today. The term originated in the 1980s. Put in your own words how to describe the behaviour of companies which do this greenwashing.
Well, it's if you're buying one thing and getting something completely different. So you think you're buying a fund, or you might be. It's easy to look at this from a company. Say you're buying shares in BP, for example. Now, BP were making a big thing a year or so ago about their green credentials. They're putting solar panels on all the top of their service stations. Were really green. But the point is, 96% of BP's their turnover is derived from oil and gas exploration. Now, I'm sure BP want to transition to lots of other areas, offshore wind and the like. But that's, to give that gloss that we're a green company, yet you are heavily involved in the exploration of fossil fuels, is kind of a green wash to a company. And we've seen other examples like this. For example, McDonald's, who switched to paper straws, which are not recyclable, or Volkswagen, the famous one, of course, where it's actually cheating its emissions tests. So we want to make sure what people think they are buying, they're actually buying. So people who want to invest based upon their principles, or indeed want to contribute their money to contribute to decarbonisation, making sure those stocks or those funds, sometimes these money is going to managed funds who then make choices of investment based upon those carbon credentials. It's having independent verification, independent standards, independent metrics, so you can decide whether a stock or a fund is actually that green.
What are you calling for in your debate today for those things that you just listed to be implemented in some way?
Yes, very much so. And I think people generally recognise we need to do this. It's just quite complicated. How do you measure one company versus another one in terms of its green credentials? Because everybody will say, well, our company's really green and we're going to do X and Y by this point in time. But it's being able to independently verify that and setting proper milestones for the decarbonisation of different organisations and also their supply chains, lots of things you've got to take into account. So what we need is our international standards, so we can all see the green credentials of a particular company or a particular fund, which is just investment in a group of companies, really. So that's what we need, so we can all internationally decide where these companies are going, whether they truly are meeting their own green statements. I think there's another key point to this as well, of course, is that what can happen in the future is you invest in one company, and that company in the future might be worth awful lot less because this is not decarbonising, and it's something called a stranded asset. A good example of this, if you'd invested in US coal producers, for example, the top 4 in 2010, the market capitalisation of those businesses is now 99% lower. So you lost a fortune by investing in those companies 10 years ago. So making sure people are investing in something they really understand is going to be future-proof in terms of decarbonisation.
The Competition and Markets Authority are going to get tough on this in the new year. I think everyone would agree with what you say and what they are trying to do. They say they're going to take action against offending firms, but how are they going to know? They can't investigate every company who claims they're green and ethical, can they?
Well, there are new rules coming in. The government's brought forward new rules. It's called the tax taxonomy, which is a bit of a complicated word for saying it's just a way to categorise certain companies. And it means companies for the first time who have to put in climate risk financial disclosure in their accounts. Bigger companies, this is from April of next year. So we'll be able to see the bonnet of these companies and see what their exposure is to future climate risks and whether they are truly contributing to decarbonisation or haven't even set foot down that path yet. I think most companies know they need to do it. Clearly, it's expensive, and also it's easy for people to make bold claims and not actually deliver on those promises. So it's all those things, but the key to this is transparency, and the government's legislated for that. But also then it's setting those metrics so we can all understand that data, so you understand and be able to compare one company with another. So a labelling regime, for example, so you can see how whether this company is transitioning, this fund is transitioning to net zero, whether it's already net zero, where it is on that path, so people can make informed judgments.
And finally, for those of us who want to buy green, buy ethically, is there any way we can know right now if what we're being told is the truth?
Well, I mean, there are people already, decent companies, decent funds, who are, are managing funds that are more focused on the environment. And there's lots of clever people within those funds, within the city and stuff, that are looking at this. So I don't think people need to be, too sceptical about some of the claims that are going around. So try to use, I would advise, try to use a decent advisor, manager, a fund manager, to be able to understand your needs, and then hopefully meet the investment recommendations they make will meet those needs and meet those criteria and your principles. So I don't think we need to be too suspicious about everything, but nevertheless, we want to make sure there is an objective framework so people can properly judge and see for themselves what is green and what is not green.
Kevin Holland-Ray, we always appreciate having you on the show. It's going to be a difficult day today. Enjoy it. Now, the internet has changed our worlds forever, but it can also be a dangerous place. Today, a new report by a cross-party committee of MPs suggests ways to make tech giants take responsibility for what they publish. I'll be talking to Labour's Lucy Powell shortly about how we can stay safer online. Before that, it's time for your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Grey skies for most of us today, with some patches of drizzle here and there as well. But it will be wet in the far northwest for northern and western Scotland in particular because of these weather fronts which are moving in from the Atlantic, containing some steady and heavy rain at times. This weaker weather front, trapped by an area of high pressure, brings thicker cloud across some central and southern parts of the UK and some light rain and drizzle at times, particularly for parts of Wales over the higher ground, southwest England as well. A chance of some breaks in the cloud towards the east of England, but thicker cloud once again further north, where it will be damp for western Scotland, with some steady rain there for the far north of Scotland. Quite breezy in the north as well, but that breeze coming in from the southwest brings mild air, so temperatures reaching 13 Celsius in some spots. It's not going to be a cold day, that's for sure. But it will be a grey day and another cloudy night to come for the vast majority. That cloud lowering to cover the hills in the west and some patchy drizzle once again, especially in the west. The steady rain across Scotland pushes south into parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northwest England. And it's a mild night. It's going to be frost-free virtually across the board. But it'll be a bright start to the day for parts of, say, the Midlands into eastern England. Some sunshine here at times, a better chance compared to this afternoon. Elsewhere, generally cloudy skies, but the area of cloud and rain across Scotland sinks south into Northern Ireland, northwest England, and it brightens up for the north of Scotland with some sunshine here, albeit with a few showers for the far north. Feeling a bit colder here, otherwise it's another very mild afternoon to come with temperatures largely in the double figures. A lot of cloud cover then as we end Wednesday. Some breaks there to the east and the far north. With high pressure building from the south as we head towards the end of the week, it's going to be largely dry, but it will stay mostly cloudy and it will turn just a little bit colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family. Welcome back. The government has been talking for ages now about how to keep us safe on the internet, but their online safety bill is still to come before Parliament. A joint committee of MPs has put out a report today proposing a series of recommendations. They include making tech giants abide by UK law, take responsibility for what is published on their platforms. Joining me now is Lucy Powell, the new Shadow Culture Secretary. Welcome to the show, Lucy.
Good afternoon.
Before we talk about online harm, I just want to ask you about the fact that you're having a poll boost, no doubt about that. It's not surprising given the government's current woes. But why is it the Lib Dems rather than the Labour Party that are the bookies' favourites in North Shropshire?
Well, you probably have to ask the bookies about that. But look, I mean, North Shropshire obviously is a very, very staunch Conservative seat. I think it's always been Conservative and they've had a very big majority there for a long time. But we've been fighting for every vote. We've got an excellent local candidate. I'm actually going there tomorrow as a member of the Shadow Cabinet. We've had Angela Rayner there today. So, you know, we're very much sort of in the running for taking votes in that seat. And I think what people will probably see is that the result of the by-election is more about a verdict on the Prime Minister and the double standards that he's been displaying and how people feel about that than it is any kind of indication about Labour.
OK, let's talk about the report that is out today from MPs on online harm. Online abuse, losing money through being scammed, young people being targeted with content that promotes self-harm or abuse. Is it the hope that all of these things will be tackled when the government finally bring forward new laws on online harms?
Well, I really hope so, because, you know, you're absolutely right to point to just a few of the issues that we're facing in this digital age. And it's been 10 years or more since we last had any kind of Communications Act, and that was when we were pretty much in the analogue age. So we've got analogue regulation trying to operate in this digital age, and it really isn't fit for purpose. The government promised this online harms bill 3.5 years ago, and it had been in the offing for a couple of years before that. So they really are dragging their feet, and it has taken an incredible amount of time. And the draft bill they came up with a few months ago, I'm afraid just wasn't really fit for purpose. It was very complicated, it was very unclear, and it was too weak on a lot of the regulation that we needed to have. So this joint committee report, which has scrutinised that draft legislation, is an excellent report that's out today. And I think if the government take on board all their 200 pages of recommendations, then it will really strengthen and simplify the bill. And that's what I want to see the government doing. And I want to see them doing that quickly so that we don't have any more delays to this bill becoming law. And there are things we could do straight away, to be honest, because there are things we could do outside of this bill. For example, like making it illegal to do cyber flashing, for example, and some of those things. We could bring that in other ways through other bills in Parliament.
The Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen said these companies have a business model based on holding users' attention for as long as possible, and they prioritise that over safety. When I read that, I thought, well, that's what television does, or newspapers do, or clothes shops do, for that matter. Isn't that just business?
Well, of course, television programmes, your programme as a broadcaster, newspapers and others are regulated in this way, and do have regulations that you have to adhere to make sure that what you're doing is factual, you know, isn't sort of spreading kind of fake news, that you are considering any harmful effects of what you're broadcasting and so on. But the social media giants and the tech giants aren't subject to any of that regulation really at all. So there isn't a level playing field when it comes to those things. So obviously that needs addressing. But it's not just about the content, which of course is very important, but it's also the practices and business models which amplify the way in which some of those harmful contents are shared. So I give an example, you know, obviously we've seen a big rise in sort of self-harm and teenagers suicide and that kind of thing. And, you know, what happens often is that if a teenager is searching for or looking at self-harm on a social media site or looking at how to kill oneself, what they'll find is that they're then actually more of that information is shared with them, and they see more and more of it, because the way these algorithms work, the way the business models work, is that it amplifies more and more of what you've wanted to look at once before. So it's not just about the content itself, but it's about the way in which it's also being amplified and shared. And that is a systematic problem, which is why it needs regulation.
And what about conspiracy theories? They're not illegal, but to some they are harmful. 20 or so years ago, the Daily Mail ran an anti-MMR campaign that gave huge prominence to Andrew Wakefield, a doctor. What if that was done online about the COVID vaccine? It's not illegal to do so.
Well, that's why I think what the Joint Committee is proposing is that there are codes of practice, and those code of practice are drawn up by Ofcom as an independent regulator, and those codes of practice, the big tech companies are therefore required to abide by those codes of practice, and they are kind of legally and regulatory binding on them, rather than the sort of tech companies themselves making judgments about whether something is or isn't harmful. I think there was a lot of concern about that, and that's what was in the draft bill. So those codes of practice would establish to some degree the difference between kind of harmful and non-harmful content that's done by the regulator and not by the tech companies themselves. But you make a fair point, which is about keeping that balance between the right of free speech and the right of people, especially young people, to be protected from harmful content. And as I said before, it's not just about the content itself, but it's about the way in which then that content gets amplified to you as a vulnerable user, that you then might be more susceptible to it. So that might be an issue rather than the content itself.
Lucy Powell, Shadow Culture Secretary. The first time you've been on my show, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Yes, lovely to be here. Thanks, Gloria.
Thank you. Now, there's a by-election in Shropshire, North Shropshire, on Thursday, and it's not looking great for the Conservative. We've spoken to voters there, and I'll be asking polling guru Sir John Curtis if the shine is coming off the Prime Minister. But first, it's Rosie with the news. Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. A mother and her partner have been found guilty over the death of 16-month-old girl Star Hobson. The toddler died in September last year from catastrophic injuries which she received at her home in West Yorkshire. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill, pictured on the right here, has been charged with her murder, and her mother, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, pictured on the left, was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. MPs will shortly vote on COVID restrictions as dozens of Conservatives are expected to rebel against the government's Plan B coronavirus measures. More than 70 backbenchers are threatening to defy the whip. Despite this, the measures, including COVID passes for entry into nightclubs and other venues, are expected to pass because they have the support of the Labour Party, who back tighter controls. People are still facing problems trying to get hold of COVID-19 tests for the second day in a row. Lateral flow tests have been unavailable to be ordered via the government website. Double jab people are being asked to take a lateral flow test every day for 7 days if they come into contact with someone with coronavirus. The wife of a US diplomat who's been charged with causing the death of a teenager by dangerous driving is going to face a UK court early next year. Anne Sakulas is accused of killing Harry Dunn in a road crash outside US military base RAF Crowton in Northamptonshire in August 2 years ago. A silent walk is going to take place in West London today in memory of the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire. People will gather at Kensington Town Hall this evening, exactly 4.5 years since the disaster. It comes exactly a week after the government apologised as part of a public inquiry into the fire. You are up to date. I'll be back with more on today's stories at 1 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So it's a big week for the Prime Minister, and not just because of coronavirus. On Thursday, there is a by-election in North Shropshire following Conservative MP Owen Paterson's resignation over allegations of sleaze. Our West Midlands correspondent, Balvindu Sidhu, has been meeting some of the voters who will determine that election result on Thursday.
Normally, obviously, as I'm a business owner, you know, Conservatives are normally my way to go, but I am losing a lot of trust in them. I think it might be time for new leadership based on that lack of trust.
No, I was a Labour, but I'm not a Labour anymore, so I've gone on to Green, what's it called? Greenpeace, is it?
Green Party.
Yeah, Green Party.
Why have you, do you think North Shropshire's ready for change? Because the Conservatives have held this seat.
I know, for years now, haven't they? Yeah, but they get in again, they always do. They always get in Oxford Street anyway.
Well, I don't know who I'm going to vote for this time, and I'll just wait and see what happens and see what one comes up with the best ideas or whatever, and go for that.
I'll always vote Tory. Yes, well, you got to stick by them thick and thin. I don't believe in kicking anyone when they're down. I'll let him below the belt.
If they had the Christmas parties and what have you, it's wrong, because like we had to suffer last year with family. You didn't see many of the families and everything. But I don't know. I don't trust any of them. So I don't know.
Well, the Conservatives made Boris Johnson their leader because he was a winner. But after several torrid weeks of sleaze and Christmas party allegations, are voters starting to get tired of the Prime Minister? Well, to tell us more, I'm delighted to be joined by the one, the only, Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University. Lovely to see you.
Good afternoon, Gloria.
John, the Lib Dems finished third in 2019, behind Labour. How do they manage to position themselves as favourites?
Frankly, it is quite remarkable. They've done it off the back of some relatively good results in the local elections in the constituency back in May. But one would have to say this doesn't look like a ripe Lib Dem prospect, at least at normal times. They need a swing of 26.4% from the Conservatives to win this constituency. Only twice before have they done better than that. Once was in Christchurch, the other time was in Newbury. This is back in the days when John Major was suffering calamitous poll ratings. But in both those cases, the Liberal Democrats were starting from second place. The one closest analogy I can cite you is that the swing required in this constituency of 26.4% is exactly the swing that the then Liberal Party secured in Orpington in 1962, again from third place, allowing Eric Lubbock to win what became a very, very famous by-election victory, because it was really the first significant electoral success for the then Liberal Party since they went to near extinction immediately after the Second World War. But then we also then have to remember, Orpington at the end was at least suburban London. It was the kind of place where perhaps the Liberals might, in good circumstances, to do well. North Shropshire is a constituency which voted nearly 60% leave in the EU referendum. And you look at the polling numbers for Liberal Democrats across the country as a whole, and virtually everybody these days who says they're going to vote for Liberal Democrats said they voted Remain back in 2016. And this is also a very different constituency from Chesham and Amersham. Chesham and Amersham, Liberal Democrats always looked like a good prospect. Starting from second, a constituency that voted Remain. Here, a constituency where they came third, and where there's a predominantly Leave vote. This doesn't look like ripe Liberal Democrat territory at all.
Did Labour miss a trick, stroke, have a tactical mistake by not positioning themselves as the only party who could beat the Tories, given that they came second in the last election?
Well, yes, they did come second. Now, to be honest, it's even a pretty tough nut for the Labour Party to crack. They need just over a 20% swing. It's only 3 times in by-elections that Labour have managed to do better than that. And that again takes us back to the John Major government of 92 to 97. And, this is a constituency that the Tories were able to hang on to back in 1997, Labour's annus mirabilis. But certainly, they kind of, rumour has it, and I'm not in a position to say whether it's true or not, rumour has it that the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats did a bit of a deal, and the Liberal Democrats were not going to fight very hard in Old Bexley because they thought perhaps Labour might have a chance of picking that up. And in return, however, the Liberal Democrats were going to be given a relatively clear run in North Shropshire. And certainly, just hearing to Lucy Powell in your previous interview, yes, she was saying, of course, the Labour Party is fighting for every vote. But Labour spokesmen are not exactly suggesting that they're going to do particularly well in this by-election. And that at least seems to imply that perhaps there's some truth to this claim. And, who knows in the end as to whether or not it's going to prove to be the right tactic at all. I think we can certainly anticipate, given the current circumstances, but, the Conservative vote in the polls now is about 13 points adrift, 12, 13 points adrift of where the party stood in the 2019 general election. So we could easily get, anything up to a 20-point drop in the Conservative vote, a much bigger drop than the 13-point in Old Bexley. But normally one would say, look, in the end, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats won't manage to coordinate sufficiently. The opposition vote will be fragmented and therefore the Conservatives would hang on to the seat. The question is whether or not there are enough Labour voters out there who are going to be willing to switch to the Democrats in a seat in which, with only one election in the last half dozen or so, that the Democrats even just narrowly managed to scrape second place.
Let's look at the wider state of the parties. Boris Johnson has become the first Tory leader to trail on the question who would make the best Prime Minister rating since 2008. Keir Starmer now in the lead for that. 44% of Britons believe Keir Starmer would make the most capable Prime Minister. 31% chose Mr Johnson. That feels pretty significant to me. It never happened while I was an MP under Ed Miliband or Jeremy Corbyn. Is it significant?
Well, it's one indication of where we're at. The truth is, if you look more deeply at the leadership numbers, what is perfectly clear is that public confidence and evaluations of Boris Johnson have plummeted pretty seriously in the wake of Partygate. The row about Owen Paterson, which of course has triggered this by-election, that did the Prime Minister some damage. But so far as his personal ratings are concerned, Partygate's done him serious damage. Frankly, because at the end of the day, the polls suggest that most voters, including many a Conservative voter, just do not believe, A, that there wasn't a party, and B, that the rules were not broken. So therefore, they are now questioning the Prime Minister's veracity and probity. On the other hand, however, when people are asked separately, do you think, of course, do you approve of or disapprove, of course, of Keir Starmer's performance as Labour leader, that's not changed very much in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I think the truth is that the fact that Sir Keir Starmer is now ahead in some of the polls, at least on leadership ratings, is more of a commentary on the weakness of the Prime Minister than it is on Sir Keir. And indeed, some of the polls that ask who would make the best Prime Minister suggest that most voters think that neither of them would make the best Prime Minister. So I think this, to be honest, just looking at how Sir Keir has been comporting himself in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think I would begin to say that Sir Keir has begun to become a politician and has become a little bit less of the lawyer. He is now seemingly to come up with some rather broader lines of attack on the Prime Minister, rather less concerned to try to fillet him forensically in Prime Minister's questions, more concerned to get those sound bites out. And I think many people felt that he gave an astute performance in his ministerial, response to the ministerial statement last night. So I can see signs of progress, but to be honest, It takes a long time to make a favourable impression on the public. He's had 2 years to do it, and he needs to make quite a lot more progress yet.
And finally, the problem with any national opinion poll is that it doesn't tell a story of what's happening in those seats that will count at the next election. What does the data say about where those lifelong Labour voters who switched to the Tories, where are they now?
The answer is that Labour's may gain some ground amongst Leave voters since 2019. Calculation I've just done, Labour's votes up by about 8 points amongst Leave voters, but then equally it's up about 3 points amongst Remain voters as well. So modest progress in closing the gap. But of course, in order to recapture some of those red wall seats, Labour doesn't necessarily need all these voters to come back towards them. And what is clear, and it's been clear in the polls for quite some time, is that when the Tory vote goes down, as it has done at the moment, it's going down primarily amongst Leave voters, because those people who voted Remain in 2016 and still voted for the Conservatives in 2019, they look like very loyal voters who are very, very difficult to dislodge, even in current circumstances. The Leave voters, of course, in the Conservative coalition, a large proportion of them are people who switched to the Conservatives in either 2017 or 2019 and are therefore perhaps the more volatile element of the Conservative support. Now that's where the Conservative vote, above all, is down as compared with 2019. Some has gone to Labour, some has gone to Reform, but the truth is probably Labour will be beginning to pick up some of those red wall seats at the moment, even though Labour's vote is still predominantly by around 2-1 across the country a whole, a pro-Remain vote.
Professor John Curtis, we always learn so much by listening to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, Lord Chancellor Dominic Raab is speaking in the House of Commons right now, talking about the changes he wants to make to the Human Rights Act. Jack Dromey, Shadow Immigration Minister, Labour MP for Birmingham Erdington, joins me now. Hi, good to see you, Jack.
Yes, and good to see you, Gloria, as well.
Dominic Raab wants to change the Human Rights Act and enable the deportation of more foreign criminals. What's not to like?
Absolutely extraordinary. We've got the courts in chaos. We have the probation service in chaos. We have huge cuts to our police service, leading to a rising crime. And instead of sorting fundamental problems that are letting the public down, for example, collapsing rape prosecutions, what he's doing instead is to attack the rights of the British people. It's fundamentally wrong.
You are a member of the Home Affairs team. How can Labour be the party of law and order?
We have been, historically. I know that the polling sometimes points in different directions, but there's a simple reality. When we were in government, we put 17,000 extra police officers on the streets, 16,000 police community support officers on the street, and crime fell by 43%. Under the Tories since 2010, we've seen a dramatic reversal. 22,000 police cuts nationwide, 2,200 in the West Midlands, and crime has soared, violent crime has soared by 41% in the West Midlands. Now, Gloria, the first duty of any government is the safety and security of its citizens, and the Tories are letting the people of the West Midlands, the people of Britain, down.
The Labour Party's campaigned against police cuts since the day it left office. Now the government is increasing the number of police officers on the street. So it didn't work during police cuts time to get you into government, and now the government are increasing the number of bobbies on the beat.
Not in the West Midlands, they're not, because we'll still be 1,000 police officers short, 1,000 police officers short. And to add insult to injury, in Warwickshire, relatively low crime compared to the West Midlands, more police officers. In Surrey, leafy Surrey, low crime Surrey, more police officers. In the West Midlands, which is a high crime area, we have 1,000 fewer police officers. So they have not put right, to the extent that they need to do, the wrongs of the past. And as a consequence, it is the public that are at risk. And let's be absolutely clear about this. Violent crime rising, I see it in my own constituency. fear, including in some streets as part of the community, a fear, for example, for people to go out at night time. And that is because of rising crime and antisocial behaviour. And at the heart of that has been the disastrous hollowing out of neighbourhood policing, that which we built in government, which proved to be so successful, and that which they have been dismantling in government ever since.
Last question, if I may, and I promise the only time I'm going to refer to you as Mr. Harriet Harman. You are married to Harriet. When she announced that she was retiring from Parliament, there's lots of testimony from people, politicians, journalists, sharing what her legacy meant to them. How would you define it?
Utterly remarkable. 40 years in the House of Commons, where the issues affecting half the population, women, never seriously featured in British politics. She has transformed the image and agenda of politics more generally and of the Labour Party in particular, and can be rightly proud of what she has achieved.
Oh, forgive me, I've just found out we've got an extra minute. May I ask you finally a more serious question? Your shadow immigration minister is stopping those migrant crossings at the top of your agenda.
For certain, this has to be tackled. The question is how you tackle it, because at the moment, for example, at the heart of the difficulties that we face is an abject failure to tackle seriously the people traffickers, to bring them to justice. But also, because there are no collaborative agreements any longer of any significance between ourselves, for example, and France, then those people traffickers are able to get away quite literally with murder. So the government talks tough, but in reality has failed to get a grip of what has been a growing crisis. And seen at its most obscene was those people who died a terrible death in the Channel.
Jack Dromey, Shadow Immigration Minister, thank you for joining us on the programme today. Nice to see you. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Of course, it's Prime Minister's Question Time tomorrow. We've got Labour's Barry Gardiner and we've got the Tories' Robert Halfon. The show is back every weekday from noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, and I'll be back with Liam at 2. We're going to be discussing those online harm recommendations from that cross-party committee of MPs in more detail. But for now, it's time for me to thank you for your company and to leave you with your weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Grey skies for most of us today, with some patches of drizzle here and there as well. But it will be wet in the far northwest for northern and western Scotland in particular because of these weather fronts which are moving in from the Atlantic, containing some steady and heavy rain at times. This weaker weather front, trapped by an area of high pressure, brings thicker cloud across some central and southern parts of the UK and some light rain and drizzle at times, particularly for parts of Wales over the higher ground, southwest England as well. A chance of some breaks in the cloud towards the east of England. Thicker cloud once again further north, where it will be damp for west